She sat at the edge of the worn-out piano bench, her fingers hovering over the keys. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the small window, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. She had been practicing for hours, yet every note still felt like a struggle. Her fingers stumbled, her confidence faltered, and she let out a soft sigh, almost as if the piano itself was judging her. Music had always been her escape. From the moment she discovered the old piano tucked away in her living room, she had been captivated. It didn't matter that it was scratched and out of tune. It didn't matter that her family often reminded her of the chores she had yet to finish or the homework she had not yet done. When she played, the world around her disappeared. Every note, every chord was a story she told without words. Her journey, however, was far from easy. She had grown up in a household where dreams were encouraged in theory but rarely supported in action. People would smile when she mentioned wanting to become a pianist. Yet the undercurrent of doubt in their voices was unmistakable. It was as though they wanted her to have ambition but were already certain she would fail. She had learned early on that passion alone would not shield her from judgment. Despite the quiet skepticism at home, she remained determined. Each evening, after finishing her schoolwork and chores, she would return to the piano. Sometimes, she played slowly, practicing scales and simple melodies. Other times, she let her emotions take over, improvising in ways that surprised even her. Each session left her exhausted, but a small spark inside her grew brighter. She knew that talent alone would not carry her. She needed persistence, and she had plenty of that. One day, a new opportunity appeared in her school. The choir was looking for students to join their music program, and she was eager to participate. The idea of performing in front of others excited her, but it also filled her with fear. She knew that playing for an audience would be far different from playing in the solitude of her room. The thought of making a mistake in front of peers made her stomach churn. Yet, she could not ignore the chance to grow. Her first rehearsal was intimidating. The choir director was a tall, imposing figure with a stern expression. There was an air of authority around him, and his eyes seemed to search for weakness in every student who entered the room. He had a reputation for being strict, sometimes harsh, and her friends whispered warnings about him. Still, she reminded herself that this was her chance to prove what she could do. The rehearsal began, and she carefully positioned herself at the piano. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the keys, but she took a deep breath and started to play. At first, the notes were soft and hesitant. The choir director's eyes narrowed, and he stepped closer, listening critically. The silence that followed each of her mistakes was deafening. He didn't speak at first, but his frown seemed to grow sharper with every misplaced note. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low but carried across the room with weight. "You're not ready for this. You should stick to something simpler." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt her cheeks burn, a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She had spent countless hours preparing, yet it felt as though every effort was invisible to him. Her hands shook as she continued to play, trying to ignore the sting of his judgment. The choir members around her exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to offer encouragement or stay silent. When the rehearsal ended, she packed her bags slowly, her mind replaying the harsh critique over and over. Walking home, the weight of the director's words pressed down on her. She wanted to cry, but she held back tears. Instead, she allowed herself to feel the anger simmering beneath the surface. She decided, in that moment, that she would not let anyone's doubt define her abilities. If the world would not recognize her talent, she would prove it herself. At home, she returned to the piano, letting her emotions guide her. The music that flowed from her fingertips was different now. It carried the frustration, the determination, and the silent defiance she felt. Her family peeked in, noticing the intensity in her playing. One of her younger siblings stood quietly nearby, eyes wide with admiration. Even though words were rarely spoken, the silent support from her sibling gave her a small boost of courage. Days turned into weeks, and she continued to practice in secret. Each evening, she challenged herself with more complex pieces, pushing the limits of her skill. She began to notice progress, subtle at first, then more pronounced. Her fingers moved with greater confidence. Her ear became more precise, and her improvisations grew bolder. She started to record herself, listening carefully to identify areas that needed improvement. Slowly, she began to trust her abilities more than she had ever before. Her friends noticed a change too. During lunch breaks and casual gatherings, some would ask her to play small melodies, and they were amazed by how quickly her skill was improving. Though the choir director continued to dismiss her publicly, the private moments of encouragement from friends and family reminded her that she was not alone. She began to understand that recognition did not always come from authority figures. Sometimes it came from those who quietly believed in her. One afternoon, she received an unexpected message. The choir director announced a small showcase for students, an opportunity for anyone who wanted to perform to step forward. Her heart raced as she considered participating. It was a chance to face the very person who had ridiculed her, a chance to show growth and skill. Fear gnawed at her, but excitement and determination pushed her forward. She decided she would participate, not for validation, but to honor the hard work she had poured into her music. As the day of the showcase approached, her nerves intensified. She practiced relentlessly, often late into the night, refining each note and perfecting her timing. She imagined the performance in her mind, anticipating mistakes and rehearsing corrections. Her bedroom was littered with sheet music, notebooks filled with practice notes, and recordings of her playing. Yet, in the midst of all this preparation, she felt a quiet thrill. This was her moment, a small step toward the dreams she had kept alive for so long. When she finally stepped into the music room for the showcase, the atmosphere was tense. Students whispered, some curious, others skeptical. The choir director was seated at the front, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room with his usual critical intensity. She felt her stomach twist, but she took a deep breath and approached the piano. Sitting down, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting herself calm. The first notes she played were tentative, but as she continued, she found her rhythm. Each chord, each melody, felt like a piece of herself being shared with the room. The whispers faded as attention focused solely on the music. Even the choir director, known for his harsh critiques, looked up with a flicker of surprise in his expression. She played with a mix of precision and emotion, the culmination of weeks of secret practice and perseverance. When the last note lingered in the air, a hush fell over the room. For a moment, it seemed as though no one knew how to react. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the space. Her friends clapped enthusiastically, some even cheering quietly. The room was alive with recognition, a moment of triumph that felt almost surreal. She allowed herself a small smile, a quiet acknowledgement that her hard work had not been in vain. The choir director approached afterward, his expression unreadable. He offered a brief nod, a subtle gesture that, though small, carried weight. She realized that while his approval was not her goal, the fact that even he could not ignore her talent was significant. More importantly, she had proven something to herself. That persistence, courage, and dedication could overcome doubt and ridicule. Walking home that evening, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, mirroring the warmth she felt inside. She thought about the journey ahead, the challenges, the critiques, the long hours of practice, but she knew she was ready. The piano, once a source of frustration and doubt, had become a companion and a testament to her resilience. She had faced ridicule, battled self-doubt, and emerged stronger, carrying within her a quiet confidence that no one could take away. That night, she returned to her piano, playing just for herself. The music flowed effortlessly, each note a reflection of her journey. She smiled as she realized that this was only the beginning. The world would see her talent soon enough, and when they did, she would be ready. Until then, she would continue to play, to grow, and to dream, knowing that her music was more than sound. It was a story of determination, courage, and the power of never giving up. She could not stop thinking about the showcase. The applause, the wide eyes, and even the small nod from the choir director replayed in her mind like a melody she could not forget. At home, she sat at the piano, hands hovering above the keys, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. The performance had been good, but she knew it was only the beginning. She wanted more. She wanted to see what she was truly capable of. Her secret practice sessions became even more intense. She challenged herself with more complicated pieces, often ones that made her fingers ache and her brain spin. She would play slowly at first, careful with each note, and then gradually increase the speed. She learned to listen to herself, noticing tiny mistakes she had missed before, and correcting them until they felt natural. Each small improvement was a victory, a reminder that her talent was growing with each passing day. One evening, as she played a particularly difficult piece, her younger sibling sat nearby, listening intently. For the first time, the child whispered, "You're really good." The words were simple, but they meant the world to her. She had spent so long feeling invisible, so long feeling that her efforts went unnoticed. Hearing that someone close believed in her talent gave her a quiet boost of confidence. She started to notice small changes in herself. Her fingers moved more fluidly, her timing was more precise, and she began to feel the emotion in each piece more deeply. Music became not just a skill but a way to express what words could not. When she played, she could feel every emotion she had kept inside: frustration, joy, hope, and even fear, come alive in the melody. It was her voice, clear and powerful. School life continued, and the choir director remained the same stern presence in her world. He criticized without mercy, pointing out small errors and making her feel small in front of others. Yet, she found that these moments no longer crushed her spirit. Instead, they fueled her determination. Each comment, each frown became a challenge. She would go home, practice harder, and imagine herself performing flawlessly the next time. The director's ridicule became a spark, not a shadow. A friend noticed her dedication and asked to hear her play outside of practice. Nervous at first, she agreed and played a short piece during lunch. The friend's reaction was immediate and full of awe. "How do you play like that?" the friend asked. The surprise and admiration in the voice made her blush, but she also felt proud. For the first time, she realized that her talent could touch others, that it could inspire and move people she cared about. The support, small as it was, reminded her that she was not alone. Even if the choir director refused to see her potential, others could. She started to dream bigger, thinking about future performances, competitions, or even recording her music. The dream felt fragile, like a delicate candle flame, but it burned brightly within her. Her days became a careful balance of schoolwork, family responsibilities, and practice. There were times when she felt overwhelmed, when the piano seemed too heavy, too difficult, too much for one person to manage. But she reminded herself why she started, why she could not give up. Each evening, she returned to the piano, her heart full of determination. The music was her constant companion, her friend in moments of doubt. Then, an unexpected opportunity came. The school announced a small music competition open to all students. Participation was optional, but the prize included a chance to perform at a larger community event. The thought of stepping in front of a bigger audience made her nervous, but also excited. This could be the moment to show that her talent was real, that her dedication had not been wasted. She debated whether to enter. The choir director would surely critique her harshly, and the thought of being humiliated in front of a larger crowd was terrifying. Yet, she could not ignore the chance. She spent the next few days practicing relentlessly, choosing a piece that was challenging yet heartfelt, one that would show her skill and emotion. At home, she played for her family in private, perfecting each note, each transition, each expression. Her sibling clapped at the end, eyes shining with admiration. "You have to do it," they said simply. Their encouragement reminded her that the audience did not have to be everyone. Even one person believing in her was enough to push her forward. The day of the competition arrived, and she could feel her heart pounding. The room was filled with students, parents, and teachers. The air was thick with anticipation. When her turn came, she approached the piano with careful steps. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and let her hands find their place on the keys. The first notes were steady, careful. She felt the familiar tension in her stomach, but she focused on the music rather than the audience. Slowly, the melody grew more confident, flowing naturally from her fingers. Each chord, each rhythm, seemed to carry a piece of her story. The long nights of practice, the moments of doubt, the quiet victories no one had seen. As she played, she noticed the audience shifting, leaning in, listening closely. Some faces softened, some eyes widened, and a few mouths fell slightly open in surprise. She could feel their attention, yet she was no longer nervous. She was connected to the music and nothing else mattered. When the last note faded, the silence in the room was almost as powerful as the music itself. Then, applause erupted, louder and more enthusiastic than she had ever experienced. Some students clapped politely, while others cheered, and parents nodded with impressed smiles. For the first time, she felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond personal satisfaction. She had touched others with her music. Even the choir director approached afterward, his expression difficult to read. He said nothing at first, simply observing her performance. She met his gaze calmly, holding her head high. Finally, he nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of her skill. It was not a loud praise, but it was more than she had expected. More importantly, she realized that recognition did not have to come from one person. She had proven to herself that her dedication and talent were real. Walking home after the competition, she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the streets, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were filled with possibilities. More performances, more pieces to master, more moments to share her music with others. She realized that the journey was just beginning, and she was ready to face whatever came next. That evening, she returned to the piano once more. She played for herself, for the joy of it, for the expression of everything she had felt and learned. The room filled with music that was more confident, more passionate, and more alive than ever before. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, that the choir director might continue to criticize, that others might doubt her. But she also knew something stronger. Her talent, her dedication, and her courage could not be taken away. Music had become more than a skill or a hobby. It was her voice, her escape, her proof that persistence could overcome doubt. And as her fingers danced across the keys, she felt a quiet certainty that no matter what lay ahead, she was ready to meet it, one note at a time. The day of the big choir concert arrived, and she could barely sleep the night before. Her mind raced with anticipation, nerves, and excitement. This was more than just another performance. It was the moment she had been preparing for secretly, the chance to show that her talent was real, even to those who had doubted her. The memory of the director's stern face haunted her, but it no longer terrified her. Instead, it pushed her to do her best. When she entered the school auditorium, it was buzzing with energy. Students, parents, and teachers filled the seats, all waiting for the concert to begin. The stage was set with bright lights, microphones, and music stands. The piano gleamed under the spotlights, almost calling her to it. She felt her heart race as she took a deep breath and stepped closer, trying to steady her nerves. Backstage, students were warming up their voices, chatting quietly, and adjusting their sheet music. She sat at the piano for a moment, letting her hands rest on the keys. The soft touch of the familiar instrument calmed her slightly, reminding her of all the late nights and long hours she had spent practicing alone. This was her moment, and she knew she had earned it. The choir director walked past, his eyes briefly landing on her. He said nothing, only a sharp nod, which carried more weight than words. She felt the tension in her stomach, but she focused on the music in front of her. This was her chance to speak without words, to let her fingers do the talking. The concert began, and each group performed their pieces. Applause echoed through the auditorium, but her mind stayed focused on her turn. She could hear whispers from the audience, curious about who would perform next. When the time came for her to step forward, she walked confidently to the piano. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. The first notes were soft, deliberate, and careful. She allowed herself to feel each chord, letting the music flow naturally. Her fingers moved with precision, yet there was emotion in every touch. The audience listened quietly, some with surprise, others with curiosity, as the melody filled the room. She could feel the connection between herself and the music, a bond that no one could break. Halfway through the piece, she lost herself completely. The music became more than notes and rhythms. It became a story, a reflection of her journey. The struggles, the ridicule, the private victories, all of it poured out through her playing. Her fingers danced across the keys with confidence and grace, expressing what words could never capture. From the corner of her eye, she noticed the choir director watching intently. His usual stern expression had softened slightly, though he tried to hide it. She felt a surge of courage, knowing that her efforts were finally being recognized, even by the one who had doubted her the most. Yet, she did not play for his approval. She played for herself, for the music, and for everyone who believed in her journey. The audience was captivated. Parents leaned forward, eyes wide with admiration. Fellow students whispered to each other in awe. The room was filled with the sound of music, pure and moving, and for the first time, she felt truly seen. Her performance was not about perfection alone. It was about emotion, expression, and the courage to keep going despite obstacles. As the final notes lingered in the air, silence fell over the auditorium. The moment felt suspended, as if everyone were holding their breath, processing what they had just heard. Then, slowly, applause erupted, growing louder and louder. The sound washed over her, warm and exhilarating. She opened her eyes, smiling as she saw faces filled with surprise, admiration, and pride. Her friends rushed forward, cheering quietly and clapping, their faces beaming with pride. Even some of the students who had been skeptical before now looked at her with newfound respect. The music had broken barriers, silenced doubts, and captured hearts. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had conveyed her story through every note. The choir director approached, his steps measured and careful. He paused in front of her, studying her performance. She met his gaze calmly, her own eyes steady. After a long moment, he nodded, a small but meaningful gesture. He said, in his quiet, measured voice, "Well done." The words were simple, but they carried weight. They were acknowledgement, respect, and recognition rolled into a single moment. She did not need more. Walking off the stage, her heart still racing, she felt a mixture of relief and joy. The concert continued, but she knew this performance would stay with her forever. It was a turning point, a moment that marked her growth, her dedication, and her courage. The audience had witnessed not just a pianist, but a young person who refused to give up, who transformed ridicule into determination. Later, when the concert ended and the auditorium emptied, she returned to the piano. She played softly, allowing the music to carry away the tension and excitement of the evening. The notes flowed freely, each one a reflection of her journey. She realized that her talent was not just in playing the piano. It was in persevering, in daring to face challenges, and in embracing the power of expression. That night, she walked home under the glow of streetlights, the echoes of applause still ringing in her ears. She felt stronger, braver, and more certain of herself than ever before. The challenges had not disappeared, but she had faced them head-on and emerged with confidence and pride. She knew that this was only the beginning, that the road ahead would hold more obstacles, but also more opportunities to grow and share her gift. At home, she returned to the piano one last time that night. She played softly, the music carrying her thoughts and emotions into the quiet room. Each note reminded her of the path she had traveled, the struggles she had overcome, and the determination that had brought her this far. She smiled, knowing that the journey was ongoing, and that each day offered a chance to improve, to explore, and to express herself through the language she loved most. Her music had become her voice, her refuge, and her proof that persistence could overcome doubt. The journey was far from over, but she no longer feared the challenges ahead. With every note she played, she felt stronger, more confident, and ready to face whatever the world had in store. And as she closed her eyes, letting the last notes linger in the air, she knew one thing for certain. Her music was unstoppable, just like her. The day after the concert, she woke up with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Everyone at school was talking about the previous night's performance. Some students whispered in hallways, others stopped her to congratulate her. She felt a rush of pride, but also a little embarrassment. She was not used to being noticed in such a public way. Yet, the feeling was good, like a small seed of confidence had taken root and was beginning to grow. She hurried to the music room after her morning classes. The piano waited for her, shining softly in the corner of the empty room. She ran her fingers across the keys, letting the sound fill the space. The music seemed alive, as if it recognized her determination and effort. It was not just practice anymore. It was her expression, her story, and her voice. The choir director walked in silently, watching her play from the doorway. She felt a familiar twinge of nervousness but pushed it aside. This time she was not playing for him or for anyone else. She was playing for herself. Each note resonated with her own experiences. The hard work, the ridicule, the late nights of practice, and the quiet triumphs that no one had seen. She felt a sense of freedom, as if each chord was a release from all the tension she had carried. After a few moments, he spoke. "I heard about your performance," he said, his voice calm but deliberate. "It seems you have talent. I underestimated you." Her heart skipped a beat. She had expected skepticism, criticism, maybe even sarcasm, not acknowledgement. She nodded quietly, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet pride. She did not need his approval, but hearing it anyway gave her a strange, satisfying sense of validation. Over the next few days, the music room became her sanctuary. She experimented with new pieces, challenging herself with complex melodies and emotional improvisations. She would close her eyes and play, letting her imagination guide her hands. Sometimes, she played slowly, savoring each note. Other times, she played with intensity, letting the rhythm carry her emotions like a river flowing through her fingers. Each session left her both exhausted and exhilarated. Her family began to notice the change too. Her younger sibling would peek into the music room and watch quietly, eyes wide with admiration. Her parents, though usually busy, commented on how much her playing had improved. The encouragement, small as it was, fueled her determination. She realized that support could come in many forms, not always loud or public, but still meaningful. At school, news of her talent spread. Students who had been indifferent or skeptical now approached her with curiosity. Some asked her to play small pieces during breaks. Others complimented her privately. She remained humble, knowing that the journey was ongoing. Talent alone was not enough. Dedication, discipline, and courage were what truly mattered. Then came an invitation she had not expected. The school announced a regional music competition, open to students from various schools. Participation meant performing in front of a much larger audience and facing competitors who were known to be highly skilled. Fear and excitement battled inside her. The thought of being on an even bigger stage was terrifying, yet she could not ignore the opportunity. She decided to enter. For the next several weeks, she devoted herself entirely to preparation. Each day after school, she practiced meticulously. She studied recordings of professional performances, learning how to express emotion through subtle changes in tempo and dynamics. She recorded herself, listened critically, and refined every detail. The work was exhausting, but each improvement felt like a step closer to her goal. Her friends continued to offer quiet encouragement. One would sit nearby while she practiced, listening without judgment. Another would bring sheet music and suggest new pieces. Their support reminded her that success was not achieved in isolation. Even as the choir director remained a critical presence, she learned to balance external skepticism with internal determination. The day of the competition arrived, bringing a mix of nerves, excitement, and anticipation. She arrived early, taking in the large auditorium, the stage lights, and the rows of seats filled with students, parents, and judges. The atmosphere was charged with energy, each performer preparing in their own way. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of all the hours she had put into preparation and practice. Backstage, she could hear the nervous chatter of other participants. Some were confident, others fidgeted and whispered to friends. She focused on her own routine, reviewing the piece in her mind, imagining the flow of the performance from beginning to end. She reminded herself that this was her chance to share her music, to convey her story through every note. When her turn came, she walked to the piano with steady steps. The bright stage lights shone on her, and she felt the eyes of the audience and judges on her. For a moment, her heart raced, but she allowed the rhythm of the music to guide her. As her fingers touched the keys, she felt a familiar calm settle over her. The piano responded, each note clear and expressive, carrying her emotions to the room. The performance unfolded beautifully. She played with a balance of precision and emotion, letting the music convey the struggles, the determination, and the quiet victories that had defined her journey. The audience was captivated, leaning forward, eyes wide, fully immersed in the melody. She noticed the judges taking notes, but she did not focus on them. She focused on the music, on the connection she had with the piano, and on the story she was telling without words. When the final note faded, silence enveloped the room for a moment, as if everyone were holding their breath. Then, applause erupted, loud and enthusiastic. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of recognition and admiration. Students, parents, and teachers alike cheered, some even standing to show their appreciation. She allowed herself a smile, feeling the joy of having touched others with her music. The judges approached afterward, offering compliments and praise for her technique and emotional expression. She listened quietly, graciously accepting the feedback without arrogance. For the first time, she understood that her talent was not only about technical skill but about the ability to communicate and connect through music. It was her courage, her perseverance, and her dedication that made her performance powerful. Walking off the stage, she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. She had faced fear, worked tirelessly, and shared her story through music. The journey had not been easy, but each challenge, each late-night practice, each moment of doubt had led her to this point. She knew that more obstacles awaited, but she also knew she had the strength to face them. Later, at home, she returned to her piano, playing softly in the quiet room. The music was her own, free from expectation, judgment, or pressure. Each note carried the experiences of the past weeks, the growth she had achieved, and the confidence she had earned. She realized that music was not just a skill or a hobby. It was a reflection of her journey, a voice that could convey emotions words could not. That night, as she closed her eyes and let the last notes linger, she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. The competition, the applause, and the recognition were important, but they were not the ultimate goal. The true reward was in the dedication, the growth, and the courage to face challenges and express herself fully. She knew that her journey was ongoing, that each day offered new opportunities to learn, to perform, and to share her music with the world. Her piano had become more than an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a mirror of her own growth. She smiled softly, knowing that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the talent, the determination, and the courage to continue. And as her fingers danced across the keys, filling the room with melody, she felt certain that her music, like her spirit, was unstoppable, carrying the story of her perseverance and triumph to all who would listen. The weeks following the competition were filled with a mixture of excitement, reflection, and new opportunities. She returned to school with a renewed sense of purpose, carrying herself with a quiet confidence that others noticed immediately. Students who had once doubted her skill now looked at her with respect, some approaching her to learn from her or to simply hear her play. She felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before, as if her hard work and dedication were finally being recognized in ways that mattered. Her piano became her sanctuary more than ever. Every evening, after finishing her schoolwork and chores, she would sit at the piano, letting her fingers explore melodies, harmonies, and improvisations. Sometimes she played familiar pieces, perfecting them and adding her own touches. Other times, she created new compositions, letting her imagination guide her hands across the keys. Music had become more than skill. It was her way of thinking, feeling, and communicating without words. The choir director began to treat her differently, not openly praising her, but offering guidance and advice where he had previously only criticized. He asked her to help other students with technique, to play alongside the choir in more complex pieces, and to participate in special events. Though he remained a strict presence, she noticed a subtle change in his demeanor. There was a quiet acknowledgement that she had grown beyond the boundaries he had once placed on her. Her friends continued to support her, though she noticed they were sometimes hesitant to express admiration openly. Still, they would quietly ask her to play during breaks or for small gatherings, clearly proud of her accomplishments. Each performance, whether small or large, reinforced her belief in her own abilities. She realized that recognition and validation came in many forms, and that the most important acknowledgement was the one she gave herself. A new opportunity arose when a local community center invited her to perform at a weekend recital. The idea of playing for a wider audience, including people from other schools and towns, made her nervous, but also thrilled. She knew that this was another chance to share her talent and dedication with others, and to experience the joy of music in a larger setting. She spent days preparing, refining every detail, ensuring that each note carried both technical precision and emotional depth. The day of the recital arrived, and she stepped onto the stage with a mix of excitement and nerves. The audience was larger than she had anticipated, and the bright lights and expectant faces made her heart race. She took a deep breath, sat at the piano, and let the music flow naturally from her fingers. The melodies were confident, expressive, and full of emotion, capturing the attention of everyone in the room. Parents, students, and community members listened in awe, their faces showing surprise and admiration at the skill and passion she displayed. As she played, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This was not about competition or accolades, but about sharing a part of herself with the world. The music carried her emotions, her struggles, and her triumphs, connecting with the audience in a way that words never could. By the time the final note lingered and faded, the applause was thunderous. She felt her heart swell with joy and gratitude, knowing that her journey had brought her to this moment. Backstage, she was approached by several teachers and music enthusiasts who expressed genuine admiration for her talent. Some offered guidance, encouragement, or invitations to perform at other events. She listened carefully, grateful for the recognition, but remained humble. She knew that the journey was far from over, and that each new opportunity would require dedication, focus, and courage. Her family, who had quietly supported her all along, was beaming with pride. Her younger sibling hugged her tightly, whispering how amazing she was. Her parents expressed their pride with warm smiles, acknowledging the hard work, determination, and passion that had brought her to this stage. For the first time, she felt the full weight of their pride and love, and it fueled her drive to continue growing as a pianist. As the weeks passed, she found herself performing more often, both at school and in the community. Each performance was a new challenge, a new opportunity to refine her skills and express herself. She learned to handle nerves, adapt to different audiences, and embrace the unpredictability of live performance. With each experience, her confidence and ability grew, and she began to think about the future in ways she had never imagined before. She realized that her journey had been about much more than piano. It had taught her resilience, patience, and the importance of believing in herself even when others doubted her. The ridicule and criticism she had once faced no longer held power over her. They were part of the past, reminders of the challenges she had overcome. She understood that success was not measured solely by applause or recognition, but by the courage to pursue her passion and the growth that came with it. One evening, after a long day of school and practice, she sat at her piano and reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the times she had felt discouraged, the moments of doubt, and the endless hours of practice. Yet, through it all, she had persisted. Her fingers moved across the keys with ease and confidence, creating music that was both beautiful and expressive. She felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that her dedication had not only improved her skill but had also shaped her character. She began to experiment with composing her own pieces, blending melodies she loved with her own ideas. The process was exciting and challenging, requiring creativity, patience, and focus. Each composition became a reflection of her journey, capturing her emotions and experiences in a form that could be shared with others. The act of creating music allowed her to express feelings that were too complex for words, and it brought her a sense of joy and fulfillment that she had never experienced before. Her friends continued to support her, attending her performances whenever possible and encouraging her to pursue new opportunities. They celebrated her successes without envy, proud to see her grow and flourish. She realized that support, friendship, and encouragement were essential parts of her journey, helping her navigate challenges and celebrate victories. The choir director, while still strict and critical at times, began to show a subtle respect for her abilities. He would ask for her advice on techniques, seek her input during rehearsals, and occasionally offer words of encouragement. While he was never overtly warm, she understood that his acknowledgement was meaningful in its own way. It reminded her that growth and recognition could take many forms, and that perseverance and skill often spoke louder than words. As the year progressed, she continued to perform, practice, and compose. Her reputation as a talented and dedicated pianist grew, and she began to receive invitations to perform at larger venues and events. Each new opportunity brought challenges, but she faced them with confidence and determination, knowing that her skills and passion could carry her through. One quiet evening, she sat at the piano, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the ridicule she had faced, the doubts she had overcome, and the countless hours of practice that had brought her to this point. She realized that the journey was about more than talent. It was about courage, perseverance, and the willingness to pursue a dream despite obstacles. Her music had become a testament to her journey, a voice that could convey her story and inspire others. She smiled as she played, each note a reflection of her growth and determination. She knew that challenges would continue to come, but she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and courage to face them. Her piano had become a symbol of her journey, a companion that had witnessed her struggles, celebrated her victories, and allowed her to express her deepest emotions. As she finished her piece, she felt a sense of completion and anticipation at the same time. Her journey was ongoing, and each day brought new opportunities to learn, grow, and share her music. She understood that her talent was not just about playing the piano. It was about persistence, courage, and the willingness to face challenges and express herself fully. She closed her eyes, letting the last notes linger in the quiet room. The music had carried her through doubt, ridicule, and fear, transforming those experiences into strength, confidence, and joy. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, for the people who had supported her, and for the music that had become an inseparable part of her life. In that moment, she knew that her path as a pianist was just beginning. She had faced challenges, embraced opportunities, and grown in ways she could never have imagined. Her music was no longer just a hobby or a skill. It was her voice, her expression, and a reflection of her perseverance and triumph. And as she prepared for the future, she felt ready to face whatever came next, confident that her talent, dedication, and courage would guide her through every note, every performance, and every stage of her journey.